9:31 p.m. Can we get a roll call, Beth?
Bonell,
Here.
Dodson. Amy, you're muted.
Sorry, the little recording thing wouldn't let me click anything.
That's okay.
I'm here.
Thank you. Dorfman,
Here.
Kim,
Here.
Murray, Novak,
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
For CCS, we have Rebecca Malinowski and Beth Stoneburner.
Thanks, Beth. Are there any additions to the agenda?
It's not necessarily an addition, Lindsay, but just an I guess it's an addition, just a topic for consideration for next year's committee for those who want to stay on.
Do we want to put that on under, I don't know, do we want to put a number, change number 7? Where do you want to put that on the agenda?
Yeah, I think just at the end.
Number 7.
Yeah.
Okay. Future committee members. And then 8 would be the adjournment. Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Any public comment? Any members of the public here? No. Too bad. It's riveting, this committee meeting. All right, so did everybody get a chance to review the minutes of the April 9th, 2024 meeting? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve those?
I move to approve.
Okay, any discussion? Joe, second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Do we have to do a roll call because we're virtual?
Yes. Sorry. Bonell,
Aye.
Dodson,
Aye.
Dorfman,
Aye.
Kim,
Yes.
Novak,
Yes.
Shepherd.
Yes.
All right, thanks, everyone. All right, Rebecca, you're up to walk us through the review of the selected policies.
Okay. So to provide a little context and reminders of where we're at and kind of what we're talking about, on my screen are the minutes from our January meeting, which Joe was right, was 6 months ago. I was like, I know we just talked about it at that meeting. No, 6 months ago. So we are talking today about new member billing, essentially, and a new member billing policy. So this came up because when I calculated for Vernon using the same calculations we've been using, the investment fee had dropped to about $2,500, which is about 10% of what other libraries had to pay in. So executive committee wanted this committee to consider whether there should be a floor on like a sort of minimum payment that libraries have to make. And we needed to actually write the policy because the bylaws reference it, but it didn't exist. So this committee in January discussed, per Beth's minutes, had a lengthy discussion regarding options. And said that, directed me to go ahead and draft a policy that did not include either a maximum or a minimum amount, like a floor or a cap, but that we should add library size into the calculation to make it more equitable. So if you remember, like Morton Grove and Mount Prospect, I mean, they came in at different times, but essentially the same formula was applied. So there was no consideration for like library size or budget in developing those numbers. So questions about the background? Okay. So I drafted a policy. The red line is pretty messy. And I hope that you were able to review it. I revised the whole new member policy because it was very procedurally heavy and not really in line with kind of what we do. So I tried to keep kind of the structure and who approves what without it being like a laundry list of tasks that are completed, because that shouldn't be in our policy. So that is kind of what we have in membership application and approval, and implementation and training is again, just to say like, you can't do stuff until we train you, which seems fair. And then kind of the meat of our discussion is this new member billing. So this whole section is pretty much new. And again, I tried to focus on like the back end principles as opposed to like how the math is actually done and like what numbers specifically are considered. So we talk about implementation costs being different than when a library is live. We talk about project fees, which was in the policy before, and hopefully this is just a little bit clearer. And then this section is the investment in the CCS Development Fund. And so what I said in the policy and what I can go over on the spreadsheet if you're interested in the math is that it will be based on contributions to the development fund and the current member fee formula. So that way, if the member fee formula changes, we can update how we calculate that investment without having to rewrite our policy. I added a section here, new members may pay in installments with no interest or penalty. If it's paid incomplete within 1 year of going live in the database. And this was something that executive committee decided maybe in like 2020-ish, but I don't know that it was like documented anywhere except in my brain and meeting minutes. And then just sort of a disclaimer that governing board really can do whatever it wants if governing board chooses to do something else. And then not much changed for this, nothing changed, I don't think, in this bottom section. So let me pause and see what folks have questions, comments, or requests to talk about my wacky spreadsheets.
I have just one question for clarification on investment. Sorry for joining late. This investment will be the equivalent of an existing member's investment in the fund over the previous 5 years. So is it like 5 years worth of investment that they're paying in?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I was reading that correctly.
Any other questions on the language for Rebecca?
Well, I think it's much clearer, Rebecca, when I read it again, all the redlining, all these laundry lists of specifics. I would be befuddled if I were a library trying to, reading this and trying to figure out if I wanted in or not. So I think the language is much clearer. It's a great improvement, I think.
Good.
Rebecca, is it okay if Rebecca folks moves on to the spreadsheet so she can walk us through those numbers? I think I'll have an easier time understanding the language once I understand the calculations.
So I'll start with this top section of previous calculation for Mount Prospect and Waukegan. So this is essentially how I determined their amount owed for the development fund. So I looked at the previous 5 fiscal years from when they requested the quote. So this is also kind of like a sticky area of like, Mount Prospect started talking to us well before they were going to go live. So their quote was like from previous, this isn't the most current fiscal year from when like they're actually paying in, but it's when they requested the quote. So, and then I applied the same to Waukegan because it felt weird not to. So I looked at how much we transferred into the development fund and then how much we rebated back to members and took the net amount for each of those 5 years. And then divided that net amount by the number of libraries that were in the consortium at that time. So that resulted in like the average rebate or contribution that a library made in that year. And then add those up. And that's how we got our number. So this is the same formula I applied for Vernon, but with an additional fiscal year on there. This big net contribution dropped out. And so you can even see here, like we dropped that amount off, and what we're looking at is a much smaller total. So we are not making any changes to that component of using the 5 years. That was just sort of an aside. So what we're proposing is that instead of dividing just sort of equally by the number of members, which would be, again, kind of like the average, knowing that we have pretty reasonable span from our largest to our smallest libraries, we would apply essentially our member fee formula. So instead of averaging year by year, which I did in the top, we take the total net amount of, in this case, for Mount Prospect and Waukegan, it's $530,000. And then we essentially apply our member fee formula to that total $530,000. So 75% of that is an even split. And then, and so this 75% is about $400,000. And then the remaining 25% is proportionate. So that even split amount is divided, in this case, I divided by 28, since that was the most recent number of members. That even split amount is here. And then on these other tabs, I calculated the same percent whole, like we do for your member fee formula. But it includes then like the prospective library as well, and got the proportionate amount for each and added. And so I gave you multiple libraries here. I gave you kind of all of our recent new members, just so you could see kind of the span of library sizes and how it would affect that payment. But for comparison, looking at just Mount Prospect and Waukegan, Mount Prospect would pay a little bit more than they're paying now. Waukegan would pay a decent chunk less. So this isn't 100% apples to apples, because again, we're looking at different fiscal years and different amounts. But for like Indian Trails, for example, probably would have ended up paying a little bit less into the fund if we had applied this formula. I also separately included Vernon area here because their amount was so different. I want to just clear it. So their total net investment amount. So again, instead of $530,000 here, we're looking at $30,000 and dividing that $30,000 kind of amongst the libraries. And so if we had applied this sort of new calculation, they'd come in at less still than we quoted them. I think overall we've taken less through the development fund with this formula, but I think the fact that we have been paying down the fund and we kind of have it leveled to a place where we're like on very steady ground. We're no longer overfunded in the development fund, so we're not going to continue to see those big rebates, but I'm also not expecting massive contributions moving forward. So that's the math. Such as it is.
So
I see a lot of just like blinking.
Rebecca, can I just ask a question? So how is money, like, I guess, replenished into the development fund?
That's a great question. So the, I'm pausing just to organize my thoughts. The short answer is it depends. Not a helpful answer. What we've done in recent years is any surplus from operating has gone to development. So anytime we were under budget, we put whatever we were under budget in development. In previous years, Beth, probably it was 2016 or earlier, that library billing calculation that we do was, a development fund amount was added to that essentially. So when I calculate the budget, when I've been doing the budget, I look at my operating expenditures and then that's my billing number. But if and when we need to increase the development fund, we would increase that billing amount for a planned transfer. So all of the transfers we've been doing have been due to budget surplus. And then of course we have interest. I mean, it's a pretty hefty account. So, I mean, we've budgeted like $30,000 of interest for this year and we'll probably exceed that. So, I mean, that's not a huge amount divided amongst our libraries, but that's where we're at.
And then tell me a little bit, Rebecca, what the development fund has been used for in the past. What were some of the big purchases?
So most recently, the development fund financed our office move. The development fund had funds set aside to pay for Vega, which we have not gone live with, so we have not paid for. And then the big spending was the migration to Innovative. So that was $1 million plus, maybe. That might not be. Don't quote me on that. We also pay part of Marchive out of the development fund. Beth, does that sound right? It's like a very small amount. I'm honestly not sure why we do it, except we've always done it that way. Just, the best reason to do things.
Is there ever a thought about investing, a set amount every year into the development fund? Based on anticipation of large projects? I mean, I know it's different than a library, right? Like,
Yeah.
money away for a new roof or a new boiler, something like that, but I don't know how often systems migrate.
Yeah, before I started, there was some planned saving that happened through the member fees because of the planned migration. And so the development fund was actually like very, very large when I first started because they were planning for the migration as well as an office renovation. And then the full office renovation didn't happen. So that was a big part of the surplus that kind of got us to this rebate situation. And the migration was expensive, but not as costly as I think it was anticipated to be. I think for a while, I think there was a plan to just like have an outside project manager, like do the whole migration, like have a temp staff person do it. And then that's not what happened. As far as your question, no, since I've been here, we have not had a thought of, we have not considered that as an option, largely because of the surplus that we've had. At this stage, we maintain a list of potential development fund uses that is reviewed annually by the Budget and Finance Committee. And then our fiscal accountability policy sets like a guideline that we want to maintain in our development fund an amount between 75 and 150% of the estimated cost of the things in the development fund use list.
Okay.
So because we have that amount, we haven't said, oh, we should like up our billing.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have a plan in place. We're at where we need to be. So, okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
So I don't know, I mean, obviously, excuse me, I've only been part of CCS again for like 5 years. So those of you who've been around for a while, like what is the history on the development? Like what was the driving reason that this was there? Because it almost feels like it's kind of a legacy thing now. Like we're maintaining it, but we're maintaining it in a policy, but it's like for something that we're not actually saving any money for. So I'm just not clear kind of what the history on it was. I don't know, Sarah, if you know, or
Brian, I mean, I wasn't here, but from Rebecca's explanation, to me, it seems like it's, it's similar to, I have a capital repair and replacement fund, right? With that I'm putting money into to save for large projects. Like, I think this is our version of large projects, right? That we should have money set aside for.
I understand that, but it just seems strange for me from the outside to say that somebody who wasn't part of the consortium automatically has to buy into that, when, like, if we already have a savings account that's there, we already have a plan in place, like, and I think I'm just thinking of it in the sense that, like, the Vernon calculation kind of shows a little bit of the, I don't want to say absurdity, but it's kind of like the way, it's like, depending on when you come in, it's such a vastly different number that I'm not sure that it's doing what the intent of it was. If there was a floor, like if it was like, you have to put in 25 grand because that's just like, you're basically chipping into the development fund, that's one thing. But I think that because there's so many, or there's such a range here, I'm just questioning the, like, is
Yeah.
it still valid or not? So
This is kind of the crux of a lot of things. And I'm just like looking at who's on the call. Maybe like we're only half of you there for the Indian Trails membership vote.
I was there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that membership vote brought up a lot of like discussion about this fund. Boy, oh boy.
You can tell from the laughing who was there and who was not.
Yeah, and those of you who
Yeah.
weren't there, I'm a troublemaker. I've always been a troublemaker. So it's just kind of, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what the most like succinct explanation that kind of came from that was essentially the idea of buy-in. So it looks at like the kind of previous 5 years, so that our members didn't like pony up for a big like $1 million migration and move to a new system and do all that work and spend all that money. And then like the year after that migration, someone comes in and like reaps the benefit of that without having contributed.
Pay for it.
And so the idea that like, well, Vernon's amount is so much less. I mean, it's because we've been paying that back to our members. Like our members haven't really had to pay in very much or at all over the past 5 years. And so, it is temporally important, like when a prospective member wants to join. So for, like Morton Grove joined the soonest after our migration, and that's reflected in the amount that they paid in, because it was like, we just did this huge thing. Our library has just paid all this money to move to this new platform and invest in this new technology. I do think it is, to some degree, like a legacy thing, in that we don't make big server purchases anymore. So it was also used in the past to like buy a new $100,000 server. And so the same idea applied, like if we buy the server 1 year and then you join the next year, you haven't paid into that server and you get the technology and like the benefit of it.
Well, yeah, and I would say, like in that case, like, because you could make an argument of, well, now the server is undersized for, adding an additional, like if there's a cost to the other members, the director who was particularly defending their taxpayers and, is no longer there, but, and by the way, I don't think she ever forgave me for this conversation.
I doubt it.
I don't think she did. I think until the day she left, I'm person non
I
grata.
heard she hung you in effigy, but that was a rumor. I never.
That would not surprise me.
What was so contentious?
I'm sorry?
What was so contentious?
Indian Trails wanted a loan.
Oh.
Yeah, so we
I
allowed
did not
Indian
want a
Trails.
loan. I mean,
I mean, I'm just using the words I heard. Just
It
using
was
the words I
Yeah, I
heard.
don't want to
was
bring up, I
perceived-
don't want to bring up hard feelings, but I mean, this is fascinating. I
No,
want
it was very interesting.
Brian.
So Alex Todd was our president at that time. And so Alex and Brian and I talked, and Brian was like, this is a bit regarding the investment amount. It was, what were you like $35,000, Brian?
it was, yeah.
Yeah. Like that's a lot of money. And at the time we were receiving, and we still are receiving, like the Rails rebate, and we're rebating. We had like some planned rebates to the development fund. And Brian was like, why are we sending checks back and forth? Like, can't we just can't I just not get a rebate while everyone else gets rebates? Which is essentially what happened. So we get Brian, and I don't remember, I feel like it was Alex.
There was
I
also
don't want to throw
something
Alex
like-
under the bus.
Wasn't there
Like,
something else we're paying over a couple of fiscal
Yeah.
years?
It was.
Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
Alex said, like, why don't we give X number of, I think it ended up being close to 3 years.
It was.
And so that provision that I mentioned earlier, that like within 1 year of go live, was kind of a reaction to that. Like, I have the authority to negotiate that up to 1 year of go live. Anything beyond that, the board needs to approve. And so like Indian Trails was beyond that. They finished their payments less than 1 year or more than 1 year after go live. And like physically paid in less because of the amount of rebates that we got. Other members have benefited from that as well. Every time we give a rebate, we like deduct that amount that a member would potentially pay in.
Well, this was the conversation I remembered when I asked you in the beginning if you could refresh our recollection, because I think we got to this point last time and we were talking about like the theory of luck. Sometimes you just get lucky. You join when there's big projects afoot, you pay for it. If you join after all that's done and paid for, you don't pay that much. And I think that's where we left it last time, when we were scratching our heads what the fair thing to do was about that sort of like, sometimes you just get lucky. That's how life is. Does anyone else remember that?
Yeah, I remember that, Joe, very clearly. And it was similar to, my recollection is really similar to yours. I guess what I'm thinking now, though, like listening to Brian and looking at the differences in between the costs, I understand the luck thing, but then I'm thinking, well, like what's 5 years, and how did we decide on 5 years? And obviously we invested $1 million into the migration, but we're still all like benefiting from that migration. Like that doesn't depreciate, right? So I don't know. I guess now I'm questioning that 5-year number.
Yeah, I think that's where some of the legacy stuff comes into, because if we think about like a server replacement schedule, like, depending on the server, like maybe it's 4 years, maybe it's 10 years. I also I don't think libraries decide when to join based on how much their development fund fee is going to be, right? Libraries decide when to join because that's the optimum time for their library based on their project schedule. Like Brian was like, I want to join CCS, but first I have to do a renovation. Sorry to put words in your mouth, but
Right. No, that's
right.
That's right.
Right. It's like what strategically makes sense for the library, and not that the cost is secondary because it is important, but nobody's like getting quotes from us every year to like pick the right year to join. So yeah, I mean,
Well, Rebecca, if this thing really operates like a capital projects fund, like, we're going to know that in years to come, we're gonna know, like, the lease is gonna be, whatever, the lease is gonna be up in 5 years or 7 years. We're gonna have to move again. So we have to start saving some money,
Right.
accumulating money in this development fund. So these things, God willing, don't appear suddenly. We know what's going to happen. We know what the expense is. We're gonna leave innovative and do something else. But, so, I mean, back to Brian's point, like, why do you have this thing? Why do we have it at all? I mean, to me, it seems like it functions like a capital projects fund. So none of us get hit with an enormous increase in any given year or a couple years. Do I understand that right?
So wait, hold on a second.
Yes.
You're asking why we have the investment or why do we have the fund?
Well, Brian, I don't want to speak for you, but I think he was asking, what is this thing for? Is that right, Brian, or?
No, it's really what the fee is. I don't question the fund. I'm questioning this fee on the front end. This is an interesting question for me, and it's one that I thought was really interesting when I was going through the thing, because it was like, well, it's gonna, like, it's costing my taxpayers money, like, for Indian trails to come on, and like we're subsidizing Indian trails, and I was like, I don't understand how that is. Nothing is changing in terms of what your members in terms of what your service is providing. And in fact, you're actually benefiting your members, your patrons, by adding an additional library to the consortium. Like, that's a benefit. So the dollars to me seem a little like, it just seems a little strange to me that it's like, well, because we paid $1 million 3 years ago, now we're gonna, make sure that we pass that cost on to the member that's coming. I mean, I'm just looking at it, purely from, like, I rate if it makes sense, the service improvement or the benefit of adding additional members to the consortium far more than a library putting in $25,000 into a investment fund. But that's the way that I look at it.
I would say that I do not disagree. This is a question I have raised with executive committee or at other times, and as more directors turn over, I think there's maybe more flexibility to look at how we do things and why. When it has been brought up previously, there was still, I think, the majority of folks saying, like, they need to have some skin in the game, because, like, they're going to get to vote. Like, if I come to you and say, I want to spend, $300,000 out of the development fund, everybody gets to vote on that, whether or not any of those dollars in the development fund came from you, was like what it came down to. I am interested in access, and I am interested in making CCS sustainable and affordable. I will say for prospective members that I've talked to, the ability to kind of pay that fee over multiple fiscal years has been beneficial. The Rails grant that covers the other costs associated with migration has, like, made keeping that investment on there, like, sustainable, or like affordable for incoming members. But the members that don't join or the potential members that don't join because of cost are not making that decision based on that investment. They're making that decision based on ongoing annual costs. So if existing members feel that, that incoming member having that financial, I guess, tie in that financial, like, heft behind their membership, if they feel like that is important for them to know that the person sitting next to them at governing board and voting on stuff has contributed in, like, a similar manner that their library has contributed, that's fine with me. If the thought is, we'll bill when we need things and address, I guess, to Joe's point, like, if we know something's coming up 5 years down the line and we're, like, deliberately saving for that for 5 years, and then someone comes and joins on that year 6, like you've just been billed for those 5 years. Yeah, I'm really like right in the middle. Like, I get it. Bringing new members, like we've demonstrated repeatedly that bringing new members in lowers costs. Where like truly before Morton Grove joined, our members were skeptical that that was a thing that was true. So we've demonstrated, 7 times, like, yeah, no, it really does bring down costs. So maybe it's worth revisiting with a larger group.
So Brian, what would your suggestion be then? I mean, are you saying then there shouldn't be this charge at all, or it should be de minimis? Or, I mean, if you were king of the world, what would you decide?
Well, I personally think that we don't need it at all, at this point. I think that the numbers show that we don't, if it goes from 35,000 when Indian Trails joined, and now it's like
2,500.
2,500. That to me, there is really no, this becomes a legacy thing for the sake of people saying that it's there, but it's really not doing anything. I've always seen like it's my annual membership that is going to be far more important, and that is skin in the game. I mean, that's a significant, more money than I'm paying for that, and so that does give me skin in the game if that's what people are concerned about. So I would personally say that it's not necessary right now, given the current operating model of CCS. And that's one way to it's like years ago, the way that CCS operated, the way that equipment had to be procured and everything, it was very appropriate. And I think in the current more of a software as a service kind of like, this is the way CCS runs, it no longer is that same importance as maybe it was years ago. That again, that's just my perspective. That's it's a newer perspective, I'm sure, from as you say, Rebecca, a newer turnover. Well, I guess I'm not turnover. A new member of CCS. So.
Rebecca, can you confirm that we have funds available for emergency situations, things that are unplanned?
Yeah, so in addition to the development fund, which is again for more like special projects, whatever, we have an operating reserve as well that is kept at a minimum of 50% of the previous year's operating. So if something calamitous happened, we could operate at minimum for 6 months from our operating reserves.
So that's,
or again, if something exploded and we needed to replace it.
right. So if a pipe burst, fire, etc., we have 7 figures in reserve to protect us for X amount of months.
And, or let's say Innovative just went out of business and we had to find a new ILS, we would have enough money to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like the sound of it, but yes, yeah, like worst case scenario. Again, we have the development fund and we have the operating reserves. The operating reserves aren't listed like specifically on our financial statement. It's just our beginning balance and our ending balance of the year. But yeah, that's governed by the fiscal accountability policy as well.
I also think too, like if an emergency did happen, the more members that we have to split the cost of that is beneficial. So to Brian's point.
Well, the other thing too is, I mean, there could be some flexibility in the bylaw. If we went to the Shepherd system, let's say, and we either said we're not, because we're stable, because we have healthy reserves, we're not going to collect this year, or we're just going to collect, again, something minimal. As long as there's flexibility and we say, but, once we realize we're going to have a expensive capital project or something of this sort, then we're going to have to start collecting and start funding this particular fund. So, you know, in other words, we're not gonna ask for any more money unless we can see something in the future that really is gonna cost a pretty penny, and we have to start saving. I mean, that's another option, you know? Like, don't ask for money when you don't need it.
So another option, I mean, how many of you put away a set amount of money each year from your budget into your capital reserve funds? Do you guys have that set every year? So do we. And it seems to me like right now CCS isn't, we don't have to put money away, right? We're at where we want to be. We've saved all the money that we want to save. But when it's time to start saving again, then we'll come up with a plan and we'll say, okay, we need to save, $100,000 every year for the next 10 years. That's going to raise, right, all of our membership costs. And then that new person who comes in is going to have to contribute to that. Correct? And that's how they would be paying in.
So is, just so I'm following, so the proposal then is kind of riffing off what Brian's talking about with the fund itself, is put the investment, like make it dormant when we're at a balance, a comfortable balance with the development fund, and bring it back when we're dipping below. Is that what I'm hearing?
To me, it sounded like that was Joe's proposal. I think Brian, I don't want to speak for you, but what I heard from Brian is just to get rid of it altogether. Was I?
The investment fund.
Yeah.
Or the investment,
Not the
one-time
fund, but the
fee,
membership
right.
investment. Was I correct there, Brian? Did I hear you right, or? Yeah.
I'm happy to draft an alternate policy. I love it.
I want to get a straw poll just to see how the group feels with the Shepherd plan. Let's call it the Shepherd.
officially, right? Officially.
Yeah, I might be against it just by calling it the Shepherd Plan. I might vote no. 'Cause
So if you were voting right now to eliminate this like new membership buy-in to the development fund, how would you vote? Are you guys comfortable? Can we just do a quick straw poll on that? Joe?
Well, I would go for the Bonell system, the hybrid,
Okay.
because, I mean, in part just to be diplomatic, because I got this impression last time this subject was raised that there are a number of libraries who don't think it's fair that these newbies don't pay, don't throw their right arm into it, because this thing is, we built it, it's not free, and you should suffer. But I mean, I'm being facetious, but I really thought there was a group of people who felt like it is not fair. New people should pay for past expenditures, So that's why I was thinking it might work, to take Brian's point, like, what is it for, So just let it go dormant, Andy said, until there's something real that perhaps strategic planning committee or the budget committee says, uh-oh, look what's on the horizon, and we've got to start collecting again.
Okay, that makes sense, and that might be more palatable for people. Frank, how do you feel?
I'm a little more old school, but I do support Brian's plan of getting rid of the fee for new members. I think those members never had a chance to vote to do whatever project it was to begin with. They do get the benefits of it, but again, as Joe says, it's life, there's time, everything's timing, right? So, I would support it. I think, it almost feels like it's sort of like, you go to join a union and they ask you, you ask how much are dues, and they say, well, how much do you have in your pocket? And it's like, it just doesn't feel right, and so I support not collecting that particular fee anymore.
Okay. Andy, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Joe's plan of, you know, keeping it in pocket, and just kind of using it when it's necessary versus just blanket across like every new member, regardless of where we're at with the fund, needs to buy into this. I think it makes more sense if we, you know, that the whomever the governing board president is and Rebecca can state that, well, here's this one thing here with the investment amount. Right now, the development fund is at X amount balance. We're good, so we're not going to be charging you to fill the coffers again. But you know, just to kind of say, but if situations were different and we're a little south of that balance line, then we would be. You know, just kind of illustrating that. I think that's fair. And as you said too, Lindsay, I think it's more palatable for the governing board.
Amy?
Hi. Well, I think I'm the newest to this committee, so I kind of feel like I shouldn't say anything because I don't know enough, but, and then my lights went off because I was holding still. Okay. So I think I'm leaning towards agreeing with Frank and Brian. The way you said it was really great because it really made sense. About, especially the part about new members paying for something that they haven't benefited from yet. That just seems odd. But yeah, that's the way I'm leaning, but I could be persuaded otherwise, maybe, I don't know.
Thanks, Amy. And Sarah?
You know, I think Frank's point was a good one, that we're asking people to pay in on a decision that was made before they had any input on the decision. You know, it is all timing. It is, you know, some people are going to get real lucky and come in when we've got a shiny new thing to share, and some people are going to come in when we're starting to ask, you know, for contributions to get a shiny new thing. And if we had a more definitive cyclical expectation of, you know, a brand new server every 5 years, then we would have a better expectation of what money we would need. But without those anticipated and more scheduled needs, it's hard to fairly, I think, come up with something to charge people, and not have it feel arbitrary and what, I don't know, punitive.
Okay. And then Rebecca, what's your feeling and how, I guess I'm thinking, you know, I think Joe's plan is smart because I think it would, I don't know, I think it would pass easier, be less contentious with the group. So strategically, that sounds smart to me. However, I know as a library director, it's hard for me to do things like that are sort of halfway, right? To me, it seems like it would be really hard for you to figure out how to word that in a policy, right? Like where we're going to use this sometimes, but then we're going to maybe pull it back out if we need it here in the future. That's just my perspective. So how does sort of the flexible approach feel to you?
Medium is I mean, I am nervous about kind of one, I don't know that it would pass if we're just like getting rid of it forever, because this agenda item essentially came from executive committee. And I was like, I don't know, guys, like, I think at Brian, I think we may have used like the exact same language, like in a software as a service world, like purchasing is just not the same. We don't do things the same way. Is this still right? Like, you know, an executive committee was like, yes, we should still do it. And there should be a minimum payment that everyone has to pay. So, you know, we've got kind of two separate microcosms here where, you know, this committee is like, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't really seem fair. It doesn't seem kind of rooted in logic. And why are we doing it? And then the other group of, you know, 7 directors is like, well, we should, they gotta pay something. Let's put a minimum. So to that end, I, you know, like a middle of the road approach of saying, as long as the development fund is at, X% of our development uses list, like we're neither going to bill our members nor bill potential new members. If it drops below, governing board will, or executive committee will, I feel like we need a mechanism of like how that's determined. Because when someone asks for a quote, I don't want to, this is my only concern, is when someone asks for a quote, I don't want to have to wait a full quarter for another governing board meeting to like figure out what that amount should be. So is it the president and the treasurer will work with me to determine, okay, whatever my quote is. That would be kind of my main concern about something that is wiggly. But I think that's addressable. I think that can be written in and handled.
That sounds logical, Rebecca.
I'm just wondering, just as a practical matter, if we would ever, if the vote would ever carry for saying get rid of it. So that's why I'm thinking about this, but this hybrid idea,
No,
that
I think
at least it's fair to the new people, but there's something there for people who are really opposed to it. And it might pass if we just say adios completely. We'll just get voted down. And I don't know. That's what I'm assuming.
maybe we do this sort of hybrid option and then Rebecca, I don't know, 3-4 years from now, we can look at it again if it, hasn't been used, but I don't know. I think if there's that ability to put it back into practice in the future, if we need it, people would like.
My only other concern is around the good old economy. Like right now, interest rates are really solid. And again, we're earning like $30,000 to $45,000 in interest this year. So like that's essentially a new member investment, right? That we're just earning. And again, your libraries all have like right? So even if we're not getting contributions from our members or new members, we're seeing growth in that fund. Whereas, that's not something we can count on long term as a growth strategy for that fund. But if we're talking about this hybrid arrangement where if we're billing our members, we would bill a new member, that seems reasonable. I'm like working through all the things out loud.
You don't want to get stuck without money. We don't want to get stuck without money because, God forbid, like there's some huge bill come in because something happened that nobody budgeted for. It's going to be,
Right. But we can't also count on a new member coming in to like save us.
to cover
from a
that
financial
either. That's
problem
true.
either.
Maybe
So that,
Chicago
that's not
Public,
like,
maybe.
they can't. They're their own system. They're their own thing. They can't
Yeah.
even if
Well,
they wanted
that's
to.
true too. It's like they're not going to save us anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of to Brian's point, right? Like,
Yeah. Right. That's not their job to save us from if we've gotten ourselves into a financial hole, it's not a new member's job to save us. Also, why would they join?
Why would they?
I don't know. I was at the executive committee meeting and I thought that, the conversation, when I left that conversation, I was like, yeah, we should just have in place what we have now, but then listening to Brian's perspective and, the Shepherd plan, it makes a whole lot of sense. Sorry, Brian. To me,
Just calling it the Shepherd system.
sorry.
It's a plan. Brian, what do you call your?
I'm already getting a trademark for that, the Shepherd system, so that'll be.
But I think, I don't know, again, I do think that Joe is right. I don't know if it would pass. Do you want to bring it back to executive committee, Rebecca? Or no?
Yeah, so it would have to go to executive committee anyway, right? Because they would be they would approve it. It actually doesn't. So theoretically, it doesn't have to go to governing board because our decision making says that executive committee can approve policy, not bylaws, but policy. I'm not sure I would be comfortable with executive committee making this approval because it is dealing with billing and membership, and that's the purview of governing board. So I probably would take it to governing board. In which case I would not want to rehash it at executive committee. I would just save it. I think it would help me and the discussion if we had a draft policy and maybe like something that would look at what the potential financial impact would be. Because I think that's what the question is going to be from the new member, like from our other members, is like, okay, but what happens if we don't? What happens? Like, so if we had these 7 libraries join and they didn't pay in, what would that fund look like today? Would you have billed the members more? I mean, again, based on our rebate history, I don't think so, but I think it would be helpful for me to go through that. And I mean, I don't think we're in a position to vote one way or the other since there's no draft language anyway. So I would suggest it be a topic for our first meeting of next year, I guess.
I mean, that's fine. So you've already given Vernon their bill. You've already given them their
Yeah.
quote. So they're really
Mhm.
not going to be affected by this. So
No.
it's really prospective libraries.
Mhm.
Okay. So we have
Yeah.
time, in other words. Okay.
Yeah, and just for a little bit of additional context, I met with the technical services manager from Antioch 2 weeks ago now. And you know, we had a nice conversation. They're currently on TLC and they're gonna upgrade to a new version. And if that makes their lives better enough, then they're gonna stay with TLC and continue with their lives. If that doesn't solve their problems, they're going to look at a migration or potentially joining CCS. In that conversation with Jennifer Norris, not Jennifer Drinka, you know, she was like, it was a fact finding, not a sales pitch, but she's like, I just don't know that there's enough added value with CCS to justify the cost over what the ILS cost would be for us as a standalone, which like, be happy to have that argument and discussion another day with them. But it wasn't, I don't think we can afford. Which this is all just to say, like, it would just be for prospective members. Even in talking with like current prospective members, I think I could say like, we're looking at this investment fee. An investment in CCS would be no more than X. As part of your incoming membership, and then see where we are when it's time to vote on their membership. So I'm agreeing with Joe in a long-winded way.
And then the plan is to bring this up again at the next meeting with the policy committee? That
I think so. I mean, I think the direction from, well, I think we're kind of split. By my notes, I have Joe, Andy, and Lindsay on the Bonnell plan, which is dormancy until needed. And I have the Shepherd system as Brian, Frank, Amy, and Sarah as why don't we just get rid of billing it?
Sarah, Frank, and Brian, would you be opposed, and Amy, would you be opposed to Rebecca, I don't know, seeing how the executive committee would feel about the sort of flexible plan?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
That's fine with me.
Brian, is it all or nothing?
I was good until it became the Shepherd system, and now it's my baby, and I'm gonna die on this hill. No.
Hey, Brian said he's gonna leave if it does. He's taking Indian trails,
Right.
packing his toys, and going
No,
home.
I'm totally good with it. I think the, you know, having that transition and, you know, kind of plan makes a lot of sense to me. So yeah, I could absolutely support that.
Rebecca, would you be comfortable, you know, kind of running this by the executive board and taking their temperature on it to see if it would be something they might consider?
Yeah, I think so. So they'll meet again in July, and that will be our new executive committee members. So we can see how they're feeling. And then based on that conversation and this conversation, I can take another stab at a draft policy for next year's bylaws and policy committee, which I hope will include several, if not all of you. I have to send out the survey still to discuss at their next meeting or their first meeting of next year. But I'll get some feedback from executive committee to play in with that.
Rebecca, I'm not gonna be at that July meeting because I'm on vacation. It's the second week, right? Of
Yeah,
July.
I can.
Okay.
Thank you for the heads up. I will convey the information. Unless someone else wants to come, you're welcome to, but I'm happy to represent the committee in Lindsay's absence.
I'm off the entire month of July, so no.
Are you really? That's amazing. Where are you going?
This is I'm taking my 4-week kind of sabbatical vacation, whatever you want to call it. So
You do
it's
that
like
every
the second or third time I've done it. So my board's supportive of it and I love it. So I like taking 4 weeks off in July because I like to be outside and
That's
I'm
incredible.
just like amazed. Wow.
And you have a lot of time to come up with new systems. So
I look forward. I look forward to
I
the
will
fruits of
say,
your
I'm not
sabbatical.
sure my staff is thrilled that I'm off for 4 weeks because when I come back, I tend to have a lot of like, hey, you know, I've been thinking, and I've got like all these great ideas that, you know, so.
Then you can just call Jo and she can help you make them more palatable.
and I can
That
schmooze
might
it.
be very helpful, honestly.
All right. I think we have a plan.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, the only other thing I just wanted to note for the next meeting, we had the IT group meeting this morning, and they were like, CCS should have an AI policy. And I was like, I think all your libraries should have AI policies. And then they were like, yeah, but what if someone just like dumps patron data into Chat GPT? And I was like, then they're fired. So I will be working on that for next year as well. But in the meantime, don't let your staff take our patron database and give it to Chat GPT. Please don't let them do that. So watch for that coming up at our next meeting as well.
Great. That's good, Rebecca.
Yeah, it was a great IT meeting. Hats off to that group for a good discussion. So that was my addition to the agenda.
That was, is that did we talk about future committee members?
That was it, just whoever's going to be on the committee for next year. I'll send a survey to everybody, all the directors, by the end of this week to ask their committee preferences. If you're going to be on the committee next year, think about your AI concerns and what we should cover in that policy. Okay. That was it.
All right. So if there's no other business.
Just Rebecca, thank you and all the work you did on the revisions and all the math. So it was very helpful. Thanks for all that effort.
Happy to do it.
All right. And thank you everybody for your contributions. Can we, or do I need a motion to adjourn the meeting? No.
You can declare it.
Declaring it over.
Yay.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And appreciate that to Rebecca. And thanks for taking notes, Beth.
Okay, everyone have a good afternoon.
Is there a way to, Brian, don't go yet. Is there a way to borrow your meeting for a minute? Because I have a question for Brian, or